Have you completed the first draft of your manuscript and about to embark on the self-editing process? Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about how to self-edit your manuscript like a pro. Hi, I'm Charlotte Chipperfield. I'm your developmental editor and your book coach, and I help women write, edit, and publish books that inspire and create impact in this world. And even though I'm a professional editor, I want to talk about how we can self-edit our books. So be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on any writing tips. So let's talk about self-editing. What in the world? How do we get started? What do we need to do, right? So editing our books is not just about catching typos. It's about stepping back and seeing your work from the reader's perspective. So this actually requires a little bit of a mindset shift from writing and being in that creative space of continuing to get our story out onto the page. And now we need to shift our mindset and think about the bigger picture. So the editing process actually requires you to view your manuscript through the lens of the reader to make sure the journey you're taking them on is clear, consistent, and impactful. So where do you start on the self-editing journey? Well, it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but step away from your manuscript. That's the first step. Stepping away. This is really important because it gives you a little bit of that space and distance. So when I just talked about switching that mindset from that creative writing, and now we want to go into the editing, by letting your manuscript kind of sit, kind of marinate, and just allow it to be there, you can then come back to it with fresh eyes. So really one of the best editing tools is not actually grammar check, it's time. So if you feel like this makes you feel uncomfortable, you don't want to be away from your manuscript that long, you want to keep moving forward, you can just put it down for a couple days. It might be a week. I know for myself, I need at least a month before I can go back to the manuscript and really feel like, okay, I've got the creativity juices, they've been flowing, and I'm ready to switch into editing mode. And so by coming back in this editing mode, you're going to have fresh eyes, you're going to have switch your perspective into that reader's perspective. It's going to help you better spot any potential weaknesses or inconsistencies or just anything that's an unclear passage. So if you are letting your manuscript sit, you've stepped away from it, I know it can be really hard to not want to work on something writing related. So you can always consider maybe reading another book in your genre to help kind of reset your creative mind and kind of come to it as almost like a case study to look at what's working well in their book, what's not working, what descriptions do you love, what really immersed you, and kind of almost analyze someone else's work to get you into the mindset of then coming back to analyze your work. You might also make note of areas that you know need to be revised in your book. I know as writers, we always have a gut instinct of like, you know what, I gotta level up my descriptions, or my dialogue isn't quite naturally flowing yet. All of these aspects are things that we intuitively know as writers as we're going through that writing process. So even just making a list of all those things that come to mind can be helpful just to get it out of your head and then have it on a piece of paper that you can then go back and review when it's time to start the editing process. Something else you can do during this time is to think about the core message or the theme of your book. So what do you want readers to take away from your book? And being able to reconnect to the why or the purpose behind your book will be really important as you move through the editing process. Because if you need to cut out pieces of your book or reshape parts of your book to match that takeaway you want readers to have, then this is going to be the time to really reconnect to your why, to the purpose behind your book, so that as you go into the editing process, you can use that as a filter to decide, is this helping me achieve what I set out to achieve? And if it isn't, then that's probably an area that will need to be edited or reworked in certain ways. Okay, so let's say you've let your manuscript sit and now you're ready to dive into the editing process. So where do you start? Well, you want to start with the big picture revisions. So this is looking at the structural and development side of your book. So this is where developmental editors, such as myself, are there to support and come in at this level. Now, I know for writers, we all have different strengths. Sometimes we're really good at structural pieces, where others are really good at grammar and spelling. And so this is where you can decide as a writer how much self-editing you want to do. You can always invite professionals into your process at any point in time, but understanding where your areas of strengths and weaknesses can help you understand where you might need to plug in other people to get the right feedback you need to make your book the best it can possibly be. So starting with the big picture structural pieces. So this is not really worrying about your word choice or your grammar. This is really focusing on the foundation of your manuscript. So this is making sure your whole book makes sense for someone else who's going to read it. So for fiction writers, this is going to be looking at, do you have a clear middle, or well, beginning, beginning, middle, and end to your book? Are your characters changing and growing throughout your book? Like, what does that character arc look like? Who were they at the beginning of the book and who are they at the end of the book? And does that feel relatable, plausible, realistic? Another question you might be asking at this stage as a fiction writer is, are there any plot holes? This is very common. It happens all the time, but there might be gaps in logic. There might be missing motivations. There might be unresolved threads. We don't want readers to finish reading our book with a bunch of questions of like, well, what happened to this character? Or like, this thing never played out. Or wait, did they romantically get together? Like, what happened? So we want to make sure that we have answered as many of the questions as possible by the end of our book. This is also the stage where you're going to look at the pacing of your book. So how are you keeping the story moving without overwhelming your readers with so much action that they're like, I don't know, this is too much, I'm exhausted reading it? Or maybe it's moving too slowly where there's not enough action and people are kind of falling off and they're not engaged. So pacing is making sure that if you do have these big, bold action scenes and things that are happening, that you actually have some quieter scenes afterwards that lets both the reader and your main character digest and react to what just happened. So pacing is really important because we want to give people the right information at the right time so that they stay engaged. We don't want to exhaust our readers. We don't want to confuse our readers. We definitely want to keep them engaged. And so by pacing out our story and having a rhythm to it is what's going to make them feel like they're engaged. They're not going to feel rushed, or they're not going to feel like it's so slow they're going to put your book down, because we don't want that to happen. So this is also where you're going to look at your characters and your themes in your books and make sure those emotional arcs are clear and consistent. Again, coming back to your theme or the purpose behind your book, we want to make sure that that theme has come through and is understood for the reader. Now, for the nonfiction readers at this developmental structural stage, you're going to be looking at things a little bit different, because I often think of your reader is your main character for nonfiction books. So if you are a coach or business owner and you have a method and strategy for getting your reader from point A to point B and helping them solve a problem, then you gotta make sure your book did that. So what is your main argument or your clear theme that you're presenting? And did you check all the marks on that? Then you might be looking at each chapter. So does each chapter logically build on the previous one? And does it lead the reader towards a very compelling conclusion? So think of your chapters as these building steps, this journey that you're taking your reader on. And are they, quite frankly, in the right order? Are they continuing to build upon the one that came before? Also for nonfiction readers, this might be where you're looking at, are there any sections that repeat ideas or feel unnecessary? This is a great place to start to ask, is this information in the right place? Or is some of this fluff and I gotta cut it? You might also look to some of your content and make sure that your points are supported with any research or stories and data. That can be really powerful in keeping readers engaged and helping to prove out your points. And again, for nonfiction readers, you're going to make sure that your book is structured in a way that is going to be easy for readers to absorb and apply the information. So you might be looking at the manuscript you wrote and you realize that maybe chapter 5 needs to be chapter 3 because it gives really important context for chapter 8. So this is when you're going to have to dig in and ask yourself, what is the purpose to each chapter and how does that purpose connect to the one that was before it or after it? I know I've worked with a couple business entrepreneurs who have written amazing books, and I have to tell you, I can't tell you how many times the book chapters at the end of the book will become the ones in the beginning, and then like the ones that are 3/4 of the way become the second part of the book. And so there's constant shifting, moving around, because what is working for you or how you've approached this topic may not be the easiest way for readers to digest it, and sometimes they might need a little bit more context in the beginning, or maybe it's in the middle. So really being able to bring your fresh eyes and ask yourself, is this the right time to be presenting this information, or do they need to know it earlier? So this can be a really hard part because oftentimes I know that in our heads, it's like, logically, this makes sense to me. Why wouldn't it make sense to anyone else? So I totally understand if that feels like an overwhelming process. And again, this is where having professional support might be able to help you because they can keep you attached to that big purpose and that big vision and help you to move those pieces around. So no matter if you're writing fiction or nonfiction, it's really important that you're looking at the structure of your book to make sure that readers are not only going to be able to consume and understand your themes, but the structure is going to be something that keeps them engaged. Okay, so once you answer these larger structural questions, the next stage of the self-editing process is to really get deeper into your scene or your chapter level editing. So this is really looking at your flow and your transitions. So for fiction writers, we want to make sure that every single scene serves a purpose. We don't want to have a bunch of fluff in there or scenes for the sake of them happening. We want to make sure that the scenes are developing characters, it's advancing the plot. We are deepening into the theme of your book. So if there are scenes that aren't serving a clear purpose or kind of filler because you wanted to get from here to here and you weren't really sure how to do that, this is where you might consider cutting something or reevaluating the value of that scene and making it stronger. This is also where you want to make sure that the transitions between your scenes and or your chapters is seamless. So we don't want to feel like we're getting like whiplash as a reader because we were just over here doing something at the fair and now this person's over here at the mall shopping and it happened in a sentence. And we're disoriented because we don't understand, we're not grounded in the scene, right? We don't understand where the scene is taking place. So avoid any abrupt jumps in time or location or perspective that can really disorient readers. And that will cause them to put your book down, which is the thing we do not want them to do. We want them to make it to the end and love your book. Something else that fiction writers want to look at during this phase of editing is look at the stakes. We want those to be consistently rising. So the stakes are what is your character up against and what is going to be the consequence if they don't maybe solve that problem or move through that issue or get the thing that they want. We want to make sure there are obstacles in their way and those obstacles are constantly raising the stakes. So there's more and more consequences for this character if they do not continue down this path. So this is where looking at your scenes to make sure there's some sort of tension or conflict, be it external in their world, in their environment around them, or internal to your characters. So maybe they're like the tension is building around deciding what to do. What path do I take? What decision do I make? That is tension. And so we need tension either internally or externally in most of our scenes so that that keeps the readers engaged because that makes readers feel something and feeling equals reading. So for nonfiction writers at this stage, we're really looking at our chapter transitions. So we want to make sure that it feels natural. So again, if you have a method or a strategy you're moving people through, we want to make sure those ideas are logical and it doesn't feel like you're jumping from place to place. Again, it should be building upon one another. This is also a great opportunity to look at your opening and closing of your chapters. So are you clearly stating what this chapter is about at the beginning? And do you have a conclusion or wrap up that really serves a purpose for the reader? Maybe you're asking them to consider the topic of the chapter and as it relates to their own life. Maybe you're giving them an activity or an action step to take. So each chapter should really have a hook that pulls that reader into the beginning of the chapter, and then it has a very clear takeaway at the end of the chapter. Also at this stage, you want to make sure that in each chapter, you're providing enough examples and case studies. So depending on the type of book you're writing, those may or may not be relevant. Maybe you're also sharing more anecdotes from your own personal life and how you've also overcome this thing you're sharing with readers. But again, if we're just sitting there telling readers what they need to do, it can be really hard for them to take that information and then apply it to their own lives. So we want to look for opportunities where you can not only make your point, but then you can validate it by showing them how you did it in your life or potential clients you've worked with, and give them a little bit more context as to why you are sharing the purpose behind that chapter. So again, it's not just about telling them the hook and the purpose of the chapter, but you want to be able to ground them into their emotions of why they should care about this and what it means for them. So this is really about thinking about your book as an experience. So at this stage, you're really looking at, am I leading the reader smoothly from one idea to the next? Okay, so the next step on the self-editing process is to go into the line editing. So this is where we're going to look at sentence by sentence in your book. We're going to look for clarity and style. So once you have the overall structure in place, you're feeling really good about the beginning, middle, end of your book, and each chapter and each scene has a purpose. Now it's time to go a layer deeper and really look at your sentence structure. So this is where you're going to want to cut unnecessary words. So instead of maybe she nodded her head, you just write she nodded. You want to watch out for repetition. So is there a word that you have used, I don't know, hundreds of times in your book? I was once working with an author who had used the word transformational more than 150 times in their book. which is a great word, love that word, but when it gets used over and over and over again, it can actually lose its power. And so we want to look for different ways that we might be able to say the same thing. So again, if there's too much repetition, then that can also be off-putting to readers because they start to kind of block out that word because they've seen it so many times and it just doesn't have the meat and the grounding that we need to keep readers engaged. So while you might overuse certain words or phrases, it's perfectly okay. We just want to find them and look for opportunities of how we can potentially reshape some of those sentences and use different words so that we can still gain the point that we were trying to make, but keep readers engaged. Also at this stage, we can look at the verbs we're using. So verbs are action oriented that keeps things moving. So think about, are there different verbs that you could be using that also help vary the movement in your book? So instead of he walked quickly, try he rushed. Play around with how you can use different words at different stages of your book to really create that impact. So also at the line editing phase, this is where you want to make sure that your voice is consistent. So if you're writing a memoir, it should feel very personal. Well, a business book might be a little bit more authoritative and accessible. In fiction, you want to make sure your point of view is consistent. So if this is in first person told by your main character, we want to make sure that there's no switching to third person. Anything that's confusing for the reader, again, we don't want to confuse our readers, we want to keep them engaged. So at this point, the line editing is really looking at, am I being as clear as I could possibly be with each of my sentences? Is what I intended to say being said? And is that going to land with my readers? So this is really looking at your sentence structure for clarity and opportunities to either be more consistent, concise, and really making sure that you are saying what you intended to say. Okay, so then after we've done our line editing, that's when we can dig in a little bit more into the copy editing. And this is often where a lot of people think of book editing is the copy editing. We think we need to just check our spelling, our grammar, look for typos, and we're ready to publish. And yes, that's a very important part of the process, but it's not the first and the end part of the process, which I hope you're learning from this video. So going into copy, this is where you can, again, continue your line editing by looking at some of the flow. So this is also looking at, is your dialogue natural? Is it specific to each character? For nonfiction, it might be, is your writing conversational and is it engaging? And this is also where you can dig into the punctuation, the grammar, and looking for those typos. So again, this is an area I know I am not good at self-editing in my own books. I need someone else to come in and really make sure that my spelling, my grammar, my flow, my punctuation is correct, because my brain often fills in what I intended to be there, but not what's actually on the page. It's kind of wild. And so it's really helpful, I know for me, that I need someone else to come in and edit my book at this stage. I can do a lot of the structural pieces because that's what I do for a living, and I love that part, but the spelling, grammar, I love a good copy editor. They are my favorite. But I know that I need that, where I know there are many writers who are really good at that stage where they might need my support to come in and do the structural pieces of it. So again, this is where it's really important to know your strengths and weaknesses so that you can come in with the most fresher eyes, the most fresh perspective to make sure your book is going to be as typo-proof as possible. So the next stage on the self-editing process is the proofreading. So this is, again, you can get a proofreader to do this. You could have maybe your beta readers or just anyone you know in your life who is really good at understanding grammar, spelling, looking for typos. So this is someone who hasn't read the book yet. They're coming in with completely fresh eyes, and they can really pick up on any of those small errors that need to be considered and just finally tweaked before you hit that publish button. So self-editing is a very powerful process, and you can also see where there might be beneficial to have other supporters in your court, just so that you do have another pair of eyes on your manuscript at some point in time. I always recommend having at least one other person read your book before you hit publish in the self-editing and self-publishing world. And this could be that you have beta readers who have provided feedback on clarity engagement, earlier on your structure, like right when you finish writing your manuscript or as you're doing those structural edits. You might also have critique partners who can analyze some of your structure and your pacing. You might work with professional editors. So there's many different ways that you can self-edit your book, but also get some outside feedback so that you're not completely like, oh no, I published my book and I just found 4 typos like 4 months later when you just opened your book to a random page. So I know that no book is ever perfect. I know we've all read a best-selling book that has a typo in it, and that's perfectly okay. So I understand we are doing the best we can do with what we have available to us, and we've also read our books 19 million times by the time they go to publish. So do your best to self-edit as much as you can, and then of course invite people into the process when that makes sense for you. And just remember that no book is ever perfect. It's okay if you end up publishing with a typo, but we know that you put your best effort forward. You've also worked with as many people as possible to prevent that from happening. And things happen, but we do want to provide our readers with the best experience possible, and being able to go deep on the editing process is really important to do. So I know the editing process does require a little bit of patience and some objectivity, but it is one of the most important processes in your publishing journey. So I hope this video has helped you understand how you can approach editing for yourself and for your book. Really, the more effort you put into self-editing your manuscript, the stronger it will be and really resonate with readers. So your story and your message deserves to be told in the best way possible. So keep refining, keep learning, and trust that the edits will bring you a finished product that you are just so happy to put out into the world. So if you like this video, please like it. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a thing. And thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next video.